in the quiet stillness of the world's deep places, where the roots of mountains twist and turn through stone, there lived a creature long forgotten by most, yet tied to the fate of all. His name was Gollum. Long ago, he was known as Smeagol, a creature of curious nature, wandering through the gentle green lands by the river. But that was in another time, before the weight of the world pressed upon his frail, shadowy figure. His mind, once whole, had been splintered, lost to the pull of something far older, far darker. The One Ring. It had whispered to him, called to him, until it became his only desire, his precious. Now, deep beneath the earth, Gollum lurked in the darkness. The cold stone walls of his cave stretched endlessly, the air thick with dampness and the quiet dripping of water echoing through the caverns. He spoke to himself in hushed, broken words, the sound barely more than a whisper, as if even the shadows should not hear. His eyes, large and pale, searched the gloom as he padded silently on bare, calloused feet, his hands brushing the rock like an old friend. Time, for Gollum, had ceased to matter. The world above, the sun, the wind, the sound of birds singing, was a distant memory, like a forgotten dream. Here, in the deep places, there was only the slow, endless crawl of night and day, a blur of time stretching on and on. And yet, in the quiet of his cave, he waited, always waiting, always longing for what he had lost. Gollum's story was one of loss, of desire, and of endless, tireless searching. But for now, in the soft, dim silence of the cave, he rested, his mind wandering through forgotten memories, drifting like a leaf on the surface of a still, dark pond. Long before the shadow of the ring darkened his mind, Gollum's story began in a quieter time. Around the year 2430 of the Third Age, he was born in a peaceful age, known as the Watchful Peace, when Sauron had yet to rise again, and the world, though ever watchful, was still. His people were the Stewards, one of the 3 breeds of hobbits, living near the Gladden Fields. Life was simple, untouched by the darkness that would later creep into his world. Gollum's true name, though rarely spoken of, was Traheld, a word in Westruun meaning burrowing or worming in, like one who burrows deep into the earth. The name Smeagol, which he would later become known by, was a translation of that name into Old English. He was born into a family of some standing, ruled by his grandmother, the matriarch of the Stewards. She was a stern, wise leader, guiding her people with the old customs of their kind. Unlike other hobbits, the Stores were different in more than just their customs. They lived by the rivers, the Gladden and the Anduin, where water was no stranger to them. While many hobbits preferred the warmth of dry earth, the Stores took to the rivers, often boating along the gentle currents, though few of them knew how to swim. They were broader, heavier in build, and some could even grow facial hair, giving them a slightly more man-like appearance. But still, they were hobbits, not quite akin to the men who lived nearby in the Vales of Anduin. Smeagol, or Trahald, as his family knew him, was the most curious of them all. Even from a young age, he had a mind full of questions and a deep fascination with the hidden things of the world. While others would look up at the hills in the sky, watching the clouds drift or the flowers bloom, Smeagol's gaze was always downward. He dug into the earth, fascinated by the roots of trees and the deep places where few cared to look. He spent his days exploring, burying himself in the mysteries of the land, tunneling under green mounds, diving into dark pools, or crouching by growing plants, as if each held a secret meant just for him. His family was well-to-do, and Smeagol lived comfortably under the care of his grandmother, surrounded by the wealth and reputation of his kin. But his heart was not content with the simple pleasures of life. While others were satisfied with their peaceful existence, Smeagol's curiosity consumed him. He longed to know more, to uncover the hidden things that others overlooked. And so, his days were filled with quiet exploration, his thoughts turning ever inward, his eyes focused on the earth beneath his feet. Smeagol's early life was shaped by curiosity and a deep knowledge of the world around him. From a young age, he learned the old tales of the War of the Last Alliance and the rise of Gondor. In the quiet moments of his youth, Smeagol and the other hobbits would sit by the riverside, listening to stories of Gondor's great kings, of the Tower of the Moon, and the stone that lay within it. Yet even as he grew up, the tower had already fallen, claimed by the dark power of the Nazgul. The once glorious Minas Ithil had become the sinister Minas Morgul, now a place of shadow. Smeagol was also fond of games of riddles, a pastime he enjoyed greatly. It was a tradition of sorts, a way to test the wit and cleverness of his friends and family. This enjoyment would later resurface when he encountered Bilbo in the deep dark of the Misty Mountains. But in his youth, it was a game of joy, not yet tainted by the darkness that would consume him. Around the year 2463, Smeagol's fate changed forever. On the morning of his birthday, he and his close relative Deagle set out in a small boat across the waters of the Gladden Fields. The reeds stood tall, and the air was filled with the quiet hum of nature. They spent their time drifting lazily, with Deagle fishing, while Smeagol roamed along the banks. The two were similar in many ways, though Deagle was sharper-eyed, while Smeagol was quicker and stronger. Hobbits, as it was known, gave presents on their birthdays, though they could also receive them. Deagle had given Smeagol a gift earlier that day, though it was small and did little to satisfy Smeagol's greed. As they drifted in the boat, a great fish suddenly took hold of Deagle's line, pulling him from the boat and into the depths of the river. As he struggled beneath the water, Deagle's keen eyes caught sight of something glimmering on the riverbed. Releasing the fish, he reached down and grasped the object, swimming back to the surface with mud and weeds in his hair. When he washed away the muck, Deagle discovered he held a golden ring. It shimmered in the sunlight, casting a mesmerizing glow. But Smeagol had been watching from the shadows, hidden behind a tree, his heart already darkened by envy. As Deagle admired the ring, Smeagol crept up behind him, his voice soft but filled with malice. "Give us that, my love," he whispered over his cousin's shoulder. "Why?" Deagle asked, clutching the ring tightly. "Because it's my birthday, my love, and I want it," Smeagol replied. The gift had given him earlier felt insignificant now, compared to the beauty of the golden ring. Deagle, his voice firm, said, "I've given you a present already, more than I could afford. I found this, and I'm going to keep it." But Smeagol's greed had already consumed him. "Oh, are you indeed, my love?" And without hesitation, Smeagol lunged forward, his hands gripping Deagle's throat. The desire for the ring overpowered everything else. He strangled Deagle there on the riverbank, the lust for the golden treasure driving him to murder. Smeagol took the ring for himself, placing it on his finger, unknowingly becoming the fourth bearer of the One Ring after Sauron, Isildur, and Deagle. No one ever discovered what had happened to Deagle. His body was hidden, and Smeagol returned to his people, but he was forever changed. The ring's power began to work on him, slowly corrupting his mind and warping his spirit. He found, to his delight, that when he wore the ring, no one could see him. He used this newfound ability to learn secrets, to spy, and to cause harm to those around him. The ring amplified his natural cunning, sharpening his senses to all that was hurtful and malicious. But with this power came isolation. His family grew wary of him, disturbed by his strange behavior. Smeagol, now called Gollum for the gurgling noise he made in his throat, was shunned by his own kin. He began to steal from them, muttering to himself as he lurked in the shadows. His once loved family turned against him, kicking him and cursing his name. Even his grandmother, the matriarch of the family, could no longer tolerate him. In her desire for peace, she banished Smeagol from their home. Alone and rejected, Smeagol wandered, weeping at the hardness of the world that had cast him out. He journeyed up the river, following a stream that led him deep into the mountains. There, in the cold dark, Smeagol found his new home. He caught fish with his bare, invisible hands, eating them raw in the shadows. He lived in the deep pools and caves, far from the light of day. One day, as he bent over the water, the hot sun burned the back of his neck, and the brightness from the pool stung his eyes. The pain of the light was unbearable for his wet, miserable gaze, and so he fled into the darkness, where the ring would keep him company, his only treasure in the world. Gollum had spent so many years deep in his cave that the sun had become a distant memory to him. On one of those rare moments, when he ventured near the surface and felt its warm rays on the back of his neck, he flinched, startled by the brightness. With a mixture of anger and fear, he shook his fist at the sun as if it had wronged him, desperate to escape its light. The misty mountains loomed ahead, offering him the perfect refuge from the sunlight. So, he slinked his way into the highlands, traveling only by night, eventually finding a dark cave hidden by a stream that flowed from the heart of the mountains. There, like a worm burrowing into the earth, Gollum vanished from the world's knowledge, taking the One Ring with him into the shadows. Even as Sauron's power began to rise again, the ring remained hidden with Gollum, its presence unknown even to the Dark Lord himself. Over time, the ring twisted both Gollum's mind and body, elongating his life far beyond its natural limits. It had been 7 years since he murdered Deagle and claimed the ring, yet that terrible act still haunted him. He would mutter to himself, clutching the ring, calling it his precious and convincing himself that it had rightfully come to him as a birthday present. This self-deception became a mantra in his mind, a means of justifying the cruel crime he committed. The ring's magic granted him a lifespan far greater than that of any ordinary hobbit, stretching his years into centuries. He lived in the darkness of the caves for over 400 years, far away from the sunlit lands. His home was a small island in the middle of a subterranean lake. From there, Gollum would fish, using his crude raft to hunt for raw fish, which he devoured. Sometimes, goblins from the nearby goblin town would wander too close, and Gollum would prey on them as well, his hunger unquenchable. Over time, his diet became so grotesque that the thought of hobbit or elven food repulsed him. The ring's curse took its toll on Gollum. Physically, he became a twisted, skeletal figure with large, pale eyes, accustomed to the darkness. His mind, too, was broken, consumed by madness. By the time Bilbo Baggins entered his cave during the events of The Hobbit in 2941, Gollum was a shadow of his former self, afflicted by near-to-total insanity. The ring had abandoned him, slipping away into the network of tunnels that led to the lake where Bilbo found it. Bilbo's arrival in the cave marked a turning point. Unbeknownst to Gollum, the ring had its own will and had chosen to leave him, seeking to return to its true master Sauron. In fact, Gandalf later remarked that the timing of the ring's departure from Gollum was no coincidence. As the necromancer's power was growing once more, the ring sought to return to its creator, and Bilbo, a most unlikely hero, became its next bearer. When Bilbo first encountered Gollum, the creature was unaware of his loss. Gollum, hearing the soft voice of another hobbit, felt a strange mix of emotions. There was a part of him, long buried, that welcomed the sound of another living being, something that reminded him of the outside world. Gandalf, in The Lord of the Rings, would later suggest that Gollum may have been glad, on some level, to hear Bilbo's voice. But his darker side, the side twisted by the ring's influence, grew angry and suspicious. After a game of riddles with Bilbo, Gollum plotted to murder him, intending to cheat from the start and turn Bilbo into an easy meal. However, when Gollum lost the game and went to retrieve his birthday present, he found the ring was missing. Realizing Bilbo's last riddle, "What have I got in my pocket?" was more than just a game. Gollum became furious. Bilbo had unwittingly discovered the ring's power of invisibility, slipping it on as Gollum searched for him. The ring made Bilbo invisible, allowing him to follow Gollum, undetected, toward the exit of the cave. Though Bilbo initially considered killing Gollum to ensure his escape, he was overcome with pity for the wretched creature. Instead, Bilbo jumped over Gollum, fleeing to freedom. As Bilbo vanished, Gollum's rage erupted, his voice echoing through the cave as he cursed Bilbo. "Thief, thief, Baggins. We hate it forever." From that moment, Gollum's hatred for the world deepened, as did his obsession with reclaiming the ring. 3 years after Bilbo's escape, in 2944, Gollum left his cave and began his search for the thief who had stolen his precious treasure. Though weakened by centuries of isolation and the ring's grip on his soul, Gollum was still bound to it. The pull of the ring grew stronger than his fear of the orcs or the sunlight. Slowly, he regained a small measure of his strength. He prowled the wilderness by night, his pale eyes gleaming in the darkness, hunting whatever unfortunate creatures he could find. Gollum's search led him to Mirkwood, where he followed the trail of Bilbo's journey, though it was faint. At last, he arrived in Lake Town, which was being rebuilt after Smaug's death, and the nearby Kingdom of Dale, which was also being restored. Gollum, cunning and stealthy, lurked in the shadows, listening to the whispers of the townsfolk. He learned of Bilbo's homeland, the Shire, and knew where to go. Yet something held Gollum back. Though he longed to return to the Shire and confront Bilbo, he was drawn elsewhere. Gandalf, suspecting that Gollum knew more about the ring than anyone else, sent hunters to track him. Gollum's trail led through Mirkwood, but he remained elusive, always a step ahead. His presence leaving behind only rumors and dreadful tales, whispered by beasts and birds alike. The woodman of Mirkwood spoke in hushed tones of a new terror stalking the forest. It was a ghostly creature that drank the blood of its victims. It climbed the trees to pluck eggs from nests, slipped into burrows to devour young creatures, and even crept through windows to snatch babies from their cradles. The tales of this horror spread fear among the people, though few could confirm what it was. Yet those who lived on the western edges of Mirkwood knew that the trail of this terror eventually turned south, leaving the forest and passing beyond the reach of the wood elves. It vanished into the wilds. During this time, Gandalf, burdened with many other pressing matters, neglected to pursue the rumors of this creature. It was a grave mistake, for in that very year, Sauron openly declared himself in Mordor, and the terror, the creature known as Gollum, turned his path towards the Dark Lord. For many years, Gollum wandered the wilderness, coming to know the black gates of Mordor and seeking a way into the desolate land. He eventually passed through the Dead Marshes, named Nindalf, and it was around the year 2980 that he discovered an alternative route into Mordor. Gollum dared to approach Minas Morgul, the city of the Ringwraiths, which he feared above all. Yet in his cunning, he found a hidden stair that led up the mountainside to Cirith Ungol. There, in the darkness, he encountered Shelob, the monstrous spider who had made her lair high in the mountains. Gollum, overwhelmed by her power, bowed before her, promising to bring her food in exchange for his life. He worshipped her as a goddess, though her desires were far simpler. She cared nothing for rings or towers or Sauron's schemes. Her only hunger was for flesh, and Gollum's promises of fresh meat kept her from devouring him. Ever since Sauron's return, prey had become scarce, so Shelob accepted Gollum's offers and let him go. In 3001, after Bilbo's unexpected farewell party, Gandalf began to suspect that Bilbo's ring was more than just a trinket. It might be one of the rings of power. He needed to be sure. So he left the ring in Frodo's care in the Shire, while he set off to seek more information. Gandalf called upon Aragorn, the greatest ranger of the North, to help him in his search for Gollum. He also instructed the rangers of the North to increase their watch over the Shire, anticipating that Gollum might one day find his way there. For several years, Gandalf regularly visited the Shire to ensure Frodo's safety. But in 3009, he renewed the search for Gollum with Aragorn. The trail had long gone cold, and it seemed their efforts would be in vain. Yet Aragorn, with his unmatched skill as a huntsman, did not give up. Together, they scoured the Wilderland, searching through the vales of Anduin, the forests of Mirkwood and Rivanion, even to the very borders of Mordor itself. But Gollum remained elusive, and though rumors of his presence persisted, they never found him. By this time, Gollum had indeed ventured into Mordor. There, he was captured by Sauron's forces and taken to Barad-dûr, the Dark Tower, where he was tortured for many years. Under the agony of Sauron's questioning, Gollum was forced to reveal everything he knew about the ring and its new bearer. From him, Sauron learned that the One Ring had been found and that it had come into the hands of a hobbit from the Shire. In early 3017, Sauron, having gained all he could from Gollum, released him. Gollum, broken and scarred by his torment, began making his way north once again, intent on reclaiming his precious ring. Aragorn, still searching, had given up on finding Gollum near Mordor. He had scouted the Black Gate and the Vale of Morgul, but without success. However, by sheer fortune, Aragorn discovered Gollum's tracks on the edge of the Dead Marshes, leading away from Mordor. He followed the trail relentlessly and finally, after much pursuit, caught up with Gollum by nightfall. The creature was no willing captive. Gollum, filled with hatred and fear, bit Aragorn in a desperate attempt to escape. But the ranger was not so easily deterred. With grim resolve, Aragorn subdued Gollum and, though their journey back was difficult, he managed to bring the wretched creature to Mirkwood, where Gandalf awaited. There, Gollum would be interrogated once more, as the shadow of the War of the Ring began to grow. But the hardest part of the journey, as Aragorn recounted, was enduring Gollum's foul presence. Aragorn kept a relentless watch over him, day and night. He led Gollum on foot, binding him with a halter around his neck and gagging him to silence his wickedness. Gollum, deprived of food and drink, eventually became more docile, though he remained filled with malice. Aragorn drove him steadily towards Mirkwood, his steps heavy with the burden of his wretched captive. Finally, they arrived, and Aragorn handed Gollum over to the elves of Thranduil's realm. Aragorn was glad to be rid of Gollum's company, for the creature stank terribly and carried with him an aura of corruption. Aragorn hoped never to lay eyes on Gollum again. Yet Gollum's fate was not yet sealed. Gandalf arrived soon after and took up the grim task of interrogating the creature. As Aragorn explained at the Council of Elrond, he had captured Gollum on February 1st, under the cover of night, to avoid detection by Sauron's spies. He forced Gollum northward, navigating a treacherous path, crossing the river Anduin just above Sangobir. Aragorn used driftwood cast upon the shoals to ferry himself and Gollum across. Binding Gollum tightly, Aragorn kept him in check throughout the journey. From there, they travelled by the westerly paths along the skirts of Mirkwood, avoiding open roads and the watchful eyes of the enemy. Their route led them across the Limelight River and over the Nimrodel, skirting the forest eaves of Lothlorien. Aragorn avoided the realm of Moria and the Gladden Fields, passing by the Carrack until they again crossed the Anduin with the help of Beorn's people. The journey was nearly 900 miles long, and Aragorn accomplished it in 50 weary days, arriving in Thranduil's realm on March 21st. 2 days later, Gandalf arrived to question Gollum. The interrogation was a grueling process. Gandalf faced hours, even days, of Gollum's growling, snorting, and lying. Through Gollum's web of deception, Gandalf had to sift carefully for grains of truth. Gollum spun an absurd tale, claiming that his grandmother had given him the ring, and that she possessed many such beautiful things, including elven rings. Gandalf knew the story was false, yet there was a shadow of truth behind it. He acknowledged that Gollum's grandmother might have been a significant figure among their people, but the idea of her possessing multiple elven rings was a laughable lie. As for Gollum's claim that the ring was a gift, that too was a fabrication. However, Gandalf persisted, and over time, he managed to extract the real story, piece by painful piece. He used the fear of fire to wring the truth from Gollum, forcing him to admit the ring's true origins. Throughout the ordeal, Gollum whined and whimpered, believing himself misunderstood and mistreated, snarling as though he were the victim in this dark tale. It was a story of lies and shadows, but in the end, Gandalf uncovered the truth. Gollum had murdered for the ring and had kept it hidden in the depths of his cave for centuries, twisted by its dark power. His pitiable state was a reflection of the ring's corrupting influence, and though Gollum was filled with hatred, Gandalf still pitied him, for he knew what the One Ring could do to any creature that came into its possession. As Gandalf explains to Frodo, when Gollum had finally revealed to me his tale, taking me as far as the end of the riddle game and Bilbo's escape, he refused to say more. His words became clouded with dark hints, and I sensed that some other greater fear weighed on him, one that even my presence could not match. He muttered ominously, swearing that he would get his revenge. He spoke of how he had been kicked, driven into a hole, and robbed of his precious. Gollum had friends now, he claimed. Good friends, strong friends. They would help him. Bilbo would pay for it, and he cursed Bilbo's name bitterly. What's more, Gollum knew where Bilbo came from, the Shire. Gandalf placed Gollum under the care of the elves in Thranduil's woodland realm. The elves of Mirkwood, led by Thranduil, were tasked with watching over him. Legolas himself had met Gollum during this time. Yet, the elves' kindness became their downfall, as Legolas later recounted to the Council of Elrond. With great sorrow in his voice, Legolas explained that he had been sent to bring grievous news. Gollum had escaped. Alas, alas, cried Legolas, his fair face filled with distress. The tidings I bring are not good, and only here have I learned how evil they may seem to this company. Smeagol, who is now called Gollum, has escaped. Escaped? Aragorn cried, the words ringing with disbelief. That is ill news indeed. We shall rue it bitterly, I fear. Legolas, distressed but honest, explained how the elves of Mirkwood had not failed through lack of vigilance, but through an excess of mercy. Not through lack of watchfulness, Legolas said, but perhaps through overkindness. We feared the prisoner had suffered enough. More is known of our doings than we would have wished. We guarded Gollum day and night at Gandalf's bidding, though the task troubled us greatly. For Gandalf had nurtured a faint hope that Gollum could be cured of his darkness. The elves did not have the heart to keep him locked in dungeons deep underground, where his old, wicked thoughts would fester and thrive. They treated him with a kindness that ultimately led to their downfall. Gimli, sitting nearby, couldn't help but mutter, "You were less tender to me," his eyes flashing as memories stirred of his own imprisonment in Thranduil's halls. Gandalf turned to him quickly. "Come now, Gimli. Pray, do not interrupt our good Legolas. That was a regretful misunderstanding." But the gravity of Gollum's escape could not be understated. The elves had been deceived by their own mercy, and now the creature had slipped away. Gollum, driven by his hatred for Bilbo and his lust for the ring, was loose in the world once more, a danger to all who crossed his path. "Enough," said Elrond firmly. "If every grievance between elves and dwarves is to be raised here, we may as well abandon this council." Gloin rose, bowing in apology as Legolas continued. "In the days of fair weather, we led Gollum through the woods. There was a tall tree standing alone, far from the others, which he liked to climb. Often we allowed him to scale the highest branches to feel the free wind, but we kept a guard at the base of the tree. One day Gollum refused to come down, and the guards were reluctant to follow him. By then, he had learned to cling to the branches with his feet as well as his hands. The elves waited patiently beneath the tree, their watch extending late into the night. It was a summer night, moonless and starless, and the forest seemed at peace until it wasn't. The darkness came alive with an ambush. A pack of orcs fell upon the elves, unawares. The elves fought fiercely and drove them off after some time. These orcs were many and ferocious, but they were not familiar with the woods, hailing from over the misty mountains. When the battle ended, however, the elves discovered that Gollum was gone, and his guards had either been slain or taken captive. It soon became clear that the attack had been planned for Gollum's rescue, and that he had known of it in advance. How such treachery was arranged, the elves could not say. But Gollum was cunning, and the enemy's spies were many. Legolas sighed. The dark creatures that were driven out in the year of Smaug's fall have returned, and in greater numbers. Mirkwood is again a place of shadow and fear, save where our realm is kept safe. The elves tracked Gollum's trail through the woods. Following it among the paths of many orcs, it led deep into the forest, heading south. But soon, the elves lost the trail, and they dared not continue. They were drawing too near to Dol Guldur, the ancient stronghold of Sauron in southern Mirkwood, a place of terrible evil. "We do not venture that way," Legolas said gravely. "Then he is lost," Gandalf remarked, his voice heavy with resignation. "We have no time to search for him again. He must do what he will. But Gollum may yet play a part in this that neither he nor Sauron have foreseen. Gandalf, as we all know, would be proven right." It was in June that the orcs ambushed the elves, giving Gollum the chance to flee. He resumed his hunt for the ring, though those who pursued him did not give up easily. By August, Gollum headed eastward toward the misty mountains. Choosing to hide in Moria, he entered the dark, abandoned halls where even his pursuers dared not follow him. For months, Gollum wandered the black depths of Moria, and we can only guess at the horrors he encountered there. He eventually found the West Gate, but could not open the doors of Durin from inside. Trapped in the darkness, his mind filled with misery and an unquenchable longing for the One Ring. Then, on the 13th of January, the Fellowship of the Ring entered Moria through the West Gate. The doors opened, and Gollum, hidden in the shadows, picked up their trail. From that moment, he began following the new ring-bearer Frodo Baggins. 2 days after the Fellowship entered Moria, Gandalf fell in battle with the Balrog, and the bridge of Khazad-dûm was destroyed. How Gollum managed to cross the chasm remains a mystery, but he escaped the darkness of Moria and continued to follow the Fellowship too. Once in Lothlorien, Frodo became aware of stealthy movements far below the trees. It wasn't the elves, for they moved in complete silence. Instead, Frodo heard faint sniffing and the scrabbling of something on the bark of the trees. Holding his breath, he peered down into the gloom. Slowly, something climbed towards him, its breath a soft hiss through closed teeth. Then Frodo saw them, two pale eyes staring up from the darkness, unblinking. The eyes lingered for a moment before vanishing, followed by a shadow slipping around the tree trunk. Almost immediately, Holder of Lorien climbed swiftly through the branches to Frodo. "There is something in this tree that I have never seen before," he said. "It was no orc. It fled as soon as I touched the tree, and it seemed wary, with skill in climbing. I almost thought it was one of you hobbits, but I did not shoot or raise the alarm. We cannot risk battle." It was Gollum, still tracking the ring-bearer through Lothlorien. After this close encounter, Gollum kept his distance, yet never lost the Fellowship's trail. He lingered around the shores of Anduin, watching as the Fellowship departed Lothlorien in boats, and he followed them by floating on a log down the river. "I'd make nothing of it but a log in the dusk, and sleep in your eyes," Sam remarked. "If it weren't for those eyes staring at us in the night." "I first saw them back north, before we reached Lothlorien. There was a strange creature climbing the Flet that night." Frodo agreed. "Yes, I saw it too. And the elves reported something following us, didn't they?" Sam frowned. And I don't like what I'm thinking. With Mr. Bilbo's stories in mind, I'd wager I could put a name to that creature. A nasty name. Gollum, maybe." Frodo sighed. "That's what I've feared for some time, ever since Moria. He must have picked up our trail there and followed us ever since. I only hoped our time in Lothlorien might have thrown him off." Sam, growing more wary, added, "We'll need to keep our eyes open, or we might feel those nasty fingers around our necks one of these nights, if we even wake up to feel anything." Despite the Fellowship's vigilance, Gollum continued to track them. After the breaking of the Fellowship, Gollum pursued Frodo and Sam into the Emynwyl. Eventually, the two hobbits confronted him. Gollum attacked, biting Sam's shoulder and nearly strangling him before Frodo subdued him with Sting. Taking pity on the wretched creature, Frodo tied an elvish rope around Gollum's ankle as a leash. But the mere touch of the rope caused Gollum great pain. Frodo then made Gollum swear to help them and travel with them as a guide. Gollum, seeing no other choice, swore an oath by the precious itself, the One Ring, and Frodo released him. Gollum was now bound to their journey, albeit with intentions that were not entirely trustworthy. Gollum played a pivotal role in guiding Frodo and Sam through the perilous terrain of Middle-earth, particularly through the Dead Marshes, and he led them to the Black Gate of Mordor. Frodo's kindness managed to evoke some remnants of Smeagol, the part of Gollum that could still keep promises. Both Frodo and Gollum understood the immense weight of the One Ring, and this forged a peculiar bond between them. In Gollum, Frodo saw his potential future, a cautionary glimpse of what the ring could do to him, which spurred Frodo's desire to save him. Meanwhile, Gollum feared that if Frodo succeeded in destroying the ring, Sauron would not get it, a dread that fueled his fragile cooperation. When they reached the Black Gate and found it well guarded, Gollum convinced Frodo and Sam to avoid it, suggesting a safer, less conspicuous route. He promised another way into Mordor, but remained evasive about the dangers awaiting them. As they ventured south through Ithilien, they were captured by Faramir and his rangers. Gollum, creeping after them, was eventually caught at the Forbidden Pool beneath Henethanoon. The brief imprisonment and Frodo's involvement in allowing it wounded Gollum's trust. His darker side re-emerged, and the Gollum that had briefly softened was gone. Faramir, however, learned that Gollum's intended path led through Cirith Ungol, a place of great evil. He warned Frodo of the lurking danger, but even Faramir was unaware that a monstrous spider named Shelob awaited them there. Despite the warning, Frodo, Sam, and Gollum continued their journey, eventually reaching the crossroads that led into the Morgul Vale. On March 11th, Gollum slipped away to Shelob's lair, plotting to betray Frodo and Sam to the creature, hoping Shelob would kill them, allowing him to reclaim the ring. Yet when he returned to find Frodo sleeping, Gollum was almost moved to repent once more. His internal struggle resurfaced, but Sam, waking and harshly scolding him, shattered whatever chance Gollum had for redemption. Enraged Gollum led them into Shelob's den, Cirith Ungol intending to carry out his betrayal. The orcs of Cirith Ungol knew Gollum as a sneak, suggesting previous dealings between them and the twisted creature. Despite his treachery, Frodo and Sam survived Shelob's attack, narrowly escaping her lair. Frodo was later freed from the Tower of Cirith Ungol, and the hobbits, against all odds, made their way to the fiery summit of Mount Doom. Gollum had followed them relentlessly, driven by his overwhelming obsession with the ring, trudging through desolate, harsh lands. By the time they reached Mount Doom, he was emaciated, a gaunt shadow of his former self. His once terrifying strength reduced to desperation. Gollum made one final, frenzied attempt to seize the ring from Frodo, but Sam, who had always harbored hatred for Gollum, pitied him at the last moment, sparing his life yet again. At the edge of the cracks of doom, Frodo, succumbing to the ring's power, claimed it for himself instead of destroying it. In that instant, Gollum attacked, biting Frodo's finger off and finally reclaiming his precious. Gollum was consumed by joy, dancing madly with the ring in hand, but in his delirium, he misstepped and fell into the fiery chasm, the ring clutched in his hand. With his last wail of precious, Gollum was gone, and with him, the ring. Ironically, it was Gollum's final act of greed that led to the ring's destruction, and in doing so, he fulfilled his unintended destiny. As Gandalf had predicted, even Gollum had a role to play. Without him, Frodo would never have destroyed the ring, and Sauron might have won. Frodo's final words to Sam were bittersweet. The quest is achieved, and now all is over. I am glad you are here with me, here at the end of all things, Sam. As the fires of Mount Doom dimmed, and the shadow of Sauron was no more, the tale of Gollum reached its tragic end. A creature so twisted by the ring, yet essential to its destruction. His final, desperate grasp for the One Ring brought about the victory of the free peoples of Middle-earth, though at the cost of his own life. Frodo, too, was spared the impossible burden of casting the ring into the fire, and in the end, it was mercy, shown to Gollum time and time again, that saved the world. Frodo and Sam, exhausted, found peace in the ashes of their victory, and the world began to heal. Now, as you settle in for the night, feel the weight of your own day lift, like Frodo letting go of his burdens. Picture the peaceful green hills of the Shire, the soft rustling of leaves in the trees, and the gentle warmth of a summer's breeze. Let the quiet of Middle-earth wash over you. The ring is gone, the journey is complete, and you are safe. All is calm, all is at peace. The gentle crackle of a distant fire, the soft hum of the wind, and the whispers of far-off rivers guide you into a deeper sleep. Rest now, traveler, for your quest is done, and tomorrow awaits with new adventures. But for now, let the quiet embrace of night carry you off to the peaceful dreams beyond. Sleep well, and remember, you're never alone in this world of stories. Good night.